I'm Erin Antroinen. I cared for both of my parents. So my dad had cancer for 8 years. He had a adenocarcinoma, and I mean, my mom was still pretty good when she was taking care of him as well. So we were just more of like in a supportive role. Me and my sister were at that time. And that was probably from like 2012 until when he passed in 2020. So the same time he beat cancer 5 times, came home on hospice. And the same week that he came home, my mom was actually diagnosed with frontal temporal lobe dementia and Parkinson's, all at the same time. And so it was just this really hard season of navigating, because we knew like probably for like 6 months to a year that things were not right. Like she was starting to have problems word finding, and like the aphasia and all of that stuff was really starting to set in. And we were having people come and like sit with her, and just so that she would have like kind of some companion stuff. But like when my dad passed, things kind of progressed pretty quickly, and I had to step in and be her full-time caregiver at that time. But yeah, so that's kind of the beginning of it all.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot to manage back to back, even if you weren't, even if you were just supporting, in your dad's care. You do a lot of important work that I'd love to ask about, but, first, sort of what was that transition like, becoming a full-time caregiver, and what was challenging at the beginning and what's been rewarding since, or still challenging?
So many things. I mean, we could be here all day. But I think the hardest thing, because I moved out at 18, right? And so I was used to, and this was, man, I hate to like just be broadcasting my age all over the internet, but like, where was I at what age? And so, so really being out of the house for a decade, like longer than a decade, 15 years, something like that. And then having to move back home. Really interestingly, like God always has a plan, right? Like it's so crazy how things work out, because in 2017, I actually had a toxic mold exposure in my home, and I ended up having to get rid of everything I owned. So I had to get rid of everything, moved in with a friend to heal, because I literally couldn't live on my own. And from there was like slowly rebuilding. And so when my dad came home on hospice, all I literally had was like a dresser, the clothes on my back, and stuff for my business. And that was it. So when I moved home, it just kind of all worked out, because they had a whole house full of stuff, right? So it was just this, like, it made it an easier transition in terms of things, because a lot of times when you join lives and you have to move back home, it's like, oh, what do I do with my house and all my stuff? Like at the time, I didn't understand the trauma and the drama of like going through mold toxicity, but it kind of all made sense. Not that I think that that's why it happened, but you know what I'm saying? Like everything can be used for good, I think. But through that, it was just like, so, because not only was I moving in with my mom to take care of my mom, but I was also dealing with the death of my dad. So it's like my dad died, and I stepped in to be my mom's full-time caretaker. And it was a whirlwind. And within that first like 60 days of my dad dying, it was in the middle of COVID. Like it was June 2020 when that happened, July 2020 when that happened. The world was shut down. We couldn't do anything. People really couldn't help us. It was challenging getting care. Like it just was this weird place to be, not only in life, but in the world. And on top of that, my mom had 2 major falls just right in my first 60 days of taking care of her. The first was she broke her back. And then the second, she had a brain bleed. And the first time they let me go to the hospital with her. And then the second time, though, they didn't, because they had to fly her. I'm in Maryland, and they had to fly her to Washington, D.C. And it just was like my whole world was flipped upside down, not being able to, it literally was like it felt like dropping my child off at the hospital hoping that somebody would be able to take care of her because she had a problem communicating. She couldn't. And it's so interesting because even up until when she just passed in March of this year, and even up until she passed, like she had a hard time communicating, and people were always like, well, how do you know what she needs, or how do you know what she's saying? And it's like, it's kind of like you get to know whoever you're taking care of, like they're your baby, you know. It's like, and babies can't talk, babies can't communicate, but it's like a mom knows when it's hungry, or he's hungry, or she's hungry, she has to go to the bathroom, or she has indigestion, or whatever. You just learn their cues. And so at that time I was entrepreneur working for myself and in direct sales. And I like continued to just take steps back and back because it didn't feel like it was my passion anymore. And it was just mentally draining and mentally challenging to even do anything beyond, like, all of a sudden I'm navigating my mom, like I'm becoming the mom to my mom. And like it, like I look back at videos and pictures and I'm just like, how did I do it? You know, and how did we navigate it? Because we focused on having a lot of fun. I know I'm kind of getting ahead of kind of where we were at, but like it just was, I mean, it's life-changing. Like my whole life was turned upside down. There's really no other, like my social life changed, my desire to have a social life changed, my work life changed, like my finances changed, like literally every vein of my life was shifted within that 6 months, you know, as was everyone's in the middle of a pandemic, but just like, let's all throw this on together, right?
Yeah, let's really compound the issue. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you just started to talk about the sort of like role reversal of becoming, you know, the parent to your parent. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit? How did you navigate that? What was challenging? What like internal work did you do to navigate this?
Yeah, that's really good. So it's funny. So my mom actually, in my direct sales business, my mom was actually my manager. Not that, you know, no, I'm sorry. She was the office manager in my business. And so she worked for me. And so it was really interesting. So for the last like 10 years of our life, we already had this like role reversal experience happening where I was like her boss or whatever. And so, and then all of a sudden, you know, this is how we actually noticed that things were going wrong. Like we started seeing like I started noticing shifts in her ability to do normal things that she would know how to do. And so stepping into like that piece and feeling like becoming the mom to her, I did a lot of journaling. I did a lot of letter writing. Like a therapist told me to like write letters to the disease, to my mom. You know, I wrote angry letters to my dad for like leaving us and for me to have to like navigate this. You know, my sister was super helpful, but I was the one that was physically in place to be able to handle everything. And honestly, like my goal every day was like, how can I make her smile? How can I find joy in the middle of this? And so we started to do the things that she loved to do. You know, we danced and we drew, we did art, and she loved flowers and she loved exercise. She loved to walk. So we continued to try to do the things that she loved to do that made it an enjoyable experience. And when I needed to cry, I cried. Like when I needed to like be angry, like I broke things, because the thing is a lot of times like we label emotions good or bad, right? We're like angry is bad or sad is bad and happy is good and joy is good, but emotions just are. And I think when we can stop labeling them good or bad and just allow them to be, there's no shame in that, right? Like I think I talk to so many caregivers that they're stuck in the guilt of like hiring caregivers or putting their parent into a home because they just can't take care of them anymore. Or just even the guilt and the sadness of like physically, like you're walking through this, like you lose your parent 100 times over before they actually pass with dementia, and just this sadness. And it's like, they're afraid to be sad, but then also like, how do you hold joy in the middle of doing that at the same time? And so every day was just really trying to figure out how to do that, because I knew that it would be possible. Because I've done it in other areas of my life. And I'm like, well, if I can do this through mold poisoning and all of that, like find joy and hold space for the grief of what I'm losing, I can do this with this. But it's like, how? And so every day was just this like onion process of figuring out what worked. And the beauty of someone that has dementia is that, like, if it didn't work, tomorrow's a new day and they won't remember it didn't work. I say that laughing, but it's true. Like we're the ones that are holding on, and my family members that I would talk to all the time, or even friends, like they have this expectation of what their loved one or what their friend used to be able to do. And I think that when there's this level of acceptance for where they are, and separating the person from the disease, right? Like they're not the same thing. And it's like, you can still love them and talk to them and spend time with them and do all the same things. And so that really helped me in navigating like how to become the mom to her. And like, but I was like a fierce mom. Like I was like, if you do not have the right energy, you do not get to be around her. Like caregivers that came in, I'm like, I'm sorry that you had a terrible day, but like my mom does not get to pay for that. Like you have to come correct, or like you don't get to hang out with mom, because so much is nonverbal with people who have dementia or Alzheimer's. And so it's like they can sense it. And then I don't know if this is true or not. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I believe that like our energy and like our like happiness or joy or whatever we're feeling, like they're going to mimic that, just like a baby does. Like, right. We're fearful, a baby's crying. Like we're fearful, a dog is barking. Like, why would it be any different with someone who's going through Alzheimer's?
Yeah, I love everything you just shared. I can totally relate with the role reversal and this, like, I like what you said about emotions not being good or bad. And that was like a pivot for me, because I think I felt like, I became my dad's parent, and, I was like mad about it, I think, or just like, I spent so much time looking for like, let's go back to, are we going to get back to me being the kid? And once I could like just accept it and let myself feel my feelings, which is, easier said than done, there was a shift, and it was like, okay, this is just our new normal.
Yeah.
You talk a lot in your work now. You are a millennial caregiver. That's your handle, all of this kind of thing. You talk about millennials becoming this like primary group of caregivers in the coming years. Can you talk a little bit about why you think this shift is happening, and what are some of the like unique challenges that millennial caregivers face now and might face sort of as this group grows?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's such a, it's, like 5 years ago, I never knew that this was going to be where I was going to be, which I'm sure you can resonate, right? Like you just never knew that this was going to be my story. And, like the whole, it's just this, there's something in the water, food, I don't know. But people are getting sick younger, like especially dementia. The rate of dementia and Alzheimer's is multiplying. And I'm in the process of like studying this and why this is, because I really want to bring value and education, not only to my audience about like how we can take care of ourselves, but like how can we also make sure that we're taking care of our brains so that we're not in our parents' situation, 20, 30 years from now. Because both of my parents died before 67. Like my dad was 67 and my mom was 66. Like she got sick at like 61. That's too soon. Like that's not enough. That's not enough time. And so I think there's this result of like us, especially millennials, we watched generations before us have kids early in life, and we decided that we want to build our careers first. A lot of us, like a lot of my friends, we either went down two paths, right? We either had kids and did family early, or we did career and are having kids in our late 30s or even 40s, and or are having infertility issues or whatever the case may be. And so I think that there's the combination, right, of us having kids later, people getting sick earlier, or even just having kids, you know, or our parents had us later in life. And so, so it's causing this like tension to where now we're going to be responsible for raising our kids, for growing our career, but then also tasked with the responsibility now of taking care of our aging parents and making sure that you have everything in need, like everything that you need to have set up financially, you know, like wills and power of attorney. It's never too early to do that sort of stuff. Like, I'm so glad, like, literally, we did it January before the pandemic, like by the skin of our teeth. I literally, because my parents, they just weren't doing very good. And I was like, so we're gonna, I like sat down with, I printed some paper off the internet and I was like, okay, these are the questions. And like, I need to know, how do you want to live? How do you want to die? What do you want at your funeral? Like that's very surface level, but that was like like we went deep on it, and like it was not a comfortable conversation at all, but I'm so glad that we had it, because honestly, it's made this process so much easier. And this is one of the biggest things that I will like die on a hill for, like to get yourself in ready for this. And then also like, not only for you to, as a millennial, you to your parents, but then also you to your kids, you know? So like, where is that preparedness? Like it's never too early to be prepared, but yeah. So.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you just said, I'll die on a hill for this. And I think what you just said about like these legal documents and getting prepared for caregiving sort of segues us nicely into this conversation about finances, which is another huge piece. And we know it's the number one stressor for caregivers at large. Finances and the stress of finances in caregiving. I'm hoping you can share a little bit personally about, you know, how did you manage this aspect of caregiving, and both by way of like the practical management of money and also like the emotional toll of finances.
So many things.
I know, sorry, just a little question.
Honestly, this has been, I mean, it still is, right? Because I'm still doing taxes and stuff for my parents and doing all of that. So it's a lot, especially when I was in the process of like not really having my own money squared away, right? That's also kind of one of the things as a millennial, like we're still learning and we're still growing. And yet now all of a sudden we're going to be asked to do things times 2 or times 3. And, I remember just being completely shut down, completely overwhelmed. Literally by the grace of God, we were able to, like, we had my parents log in to be able to get into their bank accounts. Like, this is why having this information ahead of time is so important, because literally my sister was living at the time before my dad passed, and she was like helping them out with banking. So she had access to all of that. But when my dad died, my mom couldn't remember anything. So passwords, email passwords, all of that stuff, like we think that stuff doesn't matter, or it's like a little thing, but it's like, I always, you know, I ask people all the time, like if someone needed to jump into your life and live your life and pay your bills and make sure that your life survives without you in it, could they? Because it could happen to any of us, right, at any given time. And so, so it was a lot to navigate. It was really like figuring out their budget, figuring out the mail, figuring out a system for finances, figuring out, and so especially with caregiving, it's such there's so many variable costs and things are constantly changing, right? It's like 1 month you could need this many like medical supplies and this and that. And the next month it like all of a sudden doubles, and you're not prepared for that, because all of a sudden, because dementia care goes like this, like it's all of a sudden you're like up here and you're needing way more care, and then you're down here and it's like levels off. So, and when you're not prepared for that, it's, you know, it's a huge headache. So it's just, so I had to get, a financial education real quick. You know, there was definitely, exhaustion. I definitely leaned on people who were experts in their field to teach me things about taxes, about investments, about just, you know, different things, how to budget properly and manage that, and manage variable expenses, because that was one of the biggest things. And then how do we do this and in the middle be also preparing for what's obviously coming, you know, because dementia is, it's not like there's ever a reprieve. Like, it's like today is possibly as good as it's ever going to get again. Like from here, it's, you know, and so like, how do we navigate today, but also prepare for what's coming at the same time, which just in my mind, even going back to that, like, I'm even sweating right now. Thinking about just the stress. Oh my God, just the stress. Like we ended up having to sell my mom's house because we just, one, needed the money, two, needed to be able to, like, she couldn't do stairs anymore. And like, it just, yeah, like it becomes you're going to do whatever it takes type of mentality, which doesn't always equal good decisions sometimes. Like you're doing things out of survival mode. And so
Yeah.
it was constantly this state of like, how can I get out of survival mode and get into this like productivity mode in my finances? So yeah, that was a long
Yeah.
answer.
No, that's great. I mean, there's definitely a feeling of like doing the best with what you've got or what you know.
Mhm.
You know, you mentioned that you got a real quick financial education. I initially wanted to ask, like, where did you turn for that? But I actually want to ask, like, if there's one thing that stands out from this like crash course in financial
Mhm.
education, is there like a resource that you used, or one thing that like stood out above the rest that might be useful to someone else to know that's in the same kind of boat?
Yeah, yeah. So my friend Justin actually has a financial, like he was a financial coach, and so he taught me a ton of stuff with how to like manage a budget. So really learning how to budget, but not just budget, but like um really just like it's that variable expense column and how to really manage that, and over like and over what's the word I'm looking for? Not overanalyze, over project for the amount of money that you're looking for and stuff like that. And then and also I ended up like leaving direct sales and going into getting an online job. So like being able to do that, to be able to work from home and to have something that's more steady and all of that stuff. So that was really helpful as well. But honestly, like really budgeting and understanding how to manage that budget and putting money aside and doing all of that. Because it really sucks. Like it sucks so bad because like you're suffering in your life, but then you also have to like put money aside for this, and you don't get to enjoy the things that you used to get to enjoy because you're having to be responsible. Like it's sucks. Like there's just no way around it. Like it really, like I'm like getting mad just thinking about that time, because it's like you want to love them and you want to focus on them, but there's all these like things you have to be responsible for, and now all of a sudden it all lays on you, and that's really hard.
Yeah, I think, I mean, so many people also talk about this feeling of like feeling like your life's on hold for this exact reason. You know, you're caring for someone, you're putting your financial resources away. You don't have the time or the money now to like go for beers with your friends, or whatever it is. But like, there's
Yeah.
this feeling of pause that can be kind of confusing. Um, you started to talk about your friend Justin and budgeting. I'd love to know more about like the actual system that you use. Like, were you using a spreadsheet, pen and paper? What was working well
Mhm.
about your system for managing money,
Yeah.
specifically related to caregiving, and what could have been better as you look back?
It was a spreadsheet. So it was a spreadsheet that had all the formulas. So he has a program that he like puts all the formulas in, and it made it super simple for that. As well as he connected me with another person to help with like investing and understanding all of that stuff. And gosh, what could be helpful looking back? I mean, I think definitely having I don't know, like if I could gamify it or something like that and make it fun, that would have been helpful to gamify it. The spreadsheet on my phone was nice, but probably having some sort of an app that was like super helpful probably would be nice too. Um, I mean, if it didn't happen, that would be great too. I didn't have to deal with any of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it definitely was a lifesaver, and his program and coaching was a lifesaver. And also it was a lot. And even now still, like it's just now being in like recovery mode, it's just a lot. So
Yeah. Hopefully we can plug Justin somewhere later. It sounds like that was obviously useful to you. And it sounds like you like, systems and automation. I know you talk a lot about automating like care plans and specific tasks. And I'm shifting away from finances now and more just about caring for your mom. But can you talk about sort of this importance of like streamlining caregiving processes and how that freed up energy and focus for you?
Yes. Oh my gosh. This again, another hill I'll die on. Like we can only make so many decisions a day. And especially like the whole spoon theory, right? We only have so many spoons for the day. And like if you're normal and you're healthy and you have no life going on, it takes like a quarter of a spoon to get out of bed. But if you have something going on, it takes like 3 spoons to get out of bed. So, so I had to figure out, like, I knew very quickly, like as mom's health was like going up and down, and my health was going up and down because I was still recovering from black mold at the same time as I was taking care of her. And so in the middle of it, I was like, we've got to find a way to like, I can't be making these same decisions every day, like figuring out where her meds are. And so one, I made a caregiver binder that is literally like, I wrote up all of mom's things, like all of her tics and all the things that she does, like the things that she likes to do, because whenever a caregiver would come and I'd have to train them on the caregiver. And I was like, I do not have and I don't even know if this caregiver is going to work, right? Like we're just here to learn, because it takes a while to learn if they're going to actually work. And which, I need to probably start sharing caregiver horror stories, because that's a whole nother topic for another. So navigating like how to not have decision fatigue so that I could actually have a brain for other parts of my life and not just caregiving. So I created this caregiver binder that I'm actually in the process of creating to like actually have because people keep asking me about it. And so it's like figuring out like, what are all the important things that if someone's in your home helping you with your loved one, what do they need to know about them? So that way they can get it right. Like my mom liked to have a specific fork, have a specific bowl, have a specific things that like those little things are just enough to send somebody off with dementia, that like they're all of a sudden now they're irritated and they're not being compliant. And, so it's just those little things that only you'll know because you're taking care of your loved one. So putting that together, then having like a checks and balance system of like, did I give the medication? So like checking off everything that we do every day, being able to put your pills in one place and have them labeled and fill them up for a whole week at a time. So anything that I'm doing for every single day, I try to do it like one time in the week. So I fill all the meds for the whole week. I pre-decide her outfits even. So like I would have bins set up with like Monday through Sunday, and I would have outfits in there for every day. So that way I didn't have to decide. She didn't have to decide. Like I would say, because she could still read, and I would say, go to the Monday bin, pull the clothes out, and then put them on. And I'd have to instruct her. And then obviously as things progress, I'd have to help her. But it was just those simple things that I didn't have to like go look through the laundry and go do that stuff. And it made it really easy to have somebody come into the home to be able to like dress her and do all those things. We had all her shower stuff in a container right by the shower. We had like literally anywhere in our house that we were doing things, there was just readily available the things. So that way, if she's in the bathroom and we're changing her brief, I'm like, oh my God, all the briefs are downstairs. Like I've got to now run downstairs. It's just those little things that are time and energy sucks that just like by the end of the day, you're like, I can't even think to eat for myself right now, And so, so trying to, you know, and I didn't get it right. Like, I know right now, especially on the outside of caregiving, like it's easy for me to talk about it, especially with so much energy. And if you're listening to this and you're a caregiver and you're like, well, that sounds great for you, but you're not in the middle of it anymore. And so, but it wasn't something that I did all at one time. You know, it was something like this week I worked on this and next week I did this. And then like over time, it just became a well-oiled machine to where it happened. And again, like every time something changed, then we'd have to shift things. Right. So it's just this like moving and this moving target of like what you're looking to do. And I really had to learn how to give myself grace so that I wasn't focused on because I have a tendency to be try to be perfect, like try to be the best at everything. And so I had to realize that like, there's no failure here. Like if she's happy, she's fed, she's clean, you know, I'm clean mostly, then we're good to go.
Yeah, I like to say that I'm a recovering perfectionist. I do understand that like desire to just do it, you know, have everything wrapped up with a perfect bow.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that it's like easier for you to talk about this now with such energy after the fact, because I was going to ask, you know, sort of how long did it take you to get into this system, but you've sort of answered that question, that it wasn't a perfect process. And you can take what you've learned now and hopefully help other people with a system that's already, there's the bones to it at least.
Yes.
I think what you've just described, I think we hear a lot as caregivers, like, take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself first. I think what you've just described is like a piece of self-care. Like you've developed this system so that you can free up time and energy for yourself. Wondering if there's anything else that you sort of worked into your caregiving experience to take care of yourself, whether it's systems like this or anything else that was working for you.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you asked this, because self-care, a lot of times we think of as like bubble baths and walks in the park and massages, and like, we just don't have that luxury as caregivers unless you have somebody coming in or whatever. Like you might get it, but it's a special treat. Right. And so how can we find that, how can we find respite even when we're in the middle of caring for our loved one? And that was something that, because like stress will do some crazy things. Like I got rushed to the hospital on 2 different occasions because I thought I was having a heart attack. Once they thought that I was having a blood clot in my lung, and the other, they thought I had a heart attack. It was all stress. Like it was all burnout. It was all stress. And so very quickly I knew that I needed to implement self-care habits that were things like I just talked about, like having those systems in place, because it's the stress of the chaos. Like if we can prevent chaos, creating a calm environment, not only for me, but for my mom. You know, I would give my mom something to preoccupy herself, and I would meditate, or I would pray, or I would journal. I would take time to breathe. You know, so often we're like this, right? Like we're hunched over and we're collapsing our lungs, but like, you know, I've started doing breath work and like really understanding the power of breathing into my diaphragm and actually getting oxygen to like the depths of my belly and not just surface level lungs. Like it's amazing what a fresh glass of water with minerals, like not just water, because minerals will help your body to actually absorb the water, but like, and that could just be salt. So you don't have to go buy some fancy, but make sure it's like pink salt. But like having, staying hydrated and drinking enough oxygen. Making sure that you're breathing enough, like getting breath into your lungs, like it can instantly change your mood, right? And so definitely leaning on like my people at church, and just really finding those moments, right? Like what are the things that I loved to do? Like I loved connecting. So a friend would come over and we'd watch a show together, or, you know, I really had to teach my friends and family how to be with me in this season. So that way, you know, I talk about something that I call a caregiver letter. And so that was a part of my self-care, was that I needed to teach people how to be with me. And so I had to write them a letter and tell them what I needed. You know, as caregivers, I think we have an S on our chest and we think that we can just do all things and be all things, because we are, like, we literally are, right? Like, we're being forced to, but that doesn't mean that we have to, not have people surrounding us. And honestly, like, I would not have survived this if I didn't have a community. But I think that also largely in part had to do with, I asked for what I needed, you know, whether it was for somebody to help me take mom to the doctor or come with me and do this. Like, don't try to be a martyr and go at this by yourself. You know, so often people are like, I don't have anybody, nobody's around, nobody's involved. And I'm like, well, are you just waiting for them to be involved, or are you asking them? You know, because I think people have their own stuff going on, and it's like, they love you and they want to help you, but like, if you're not being specific, they're going to think you're okay. And so a large part of my self-care was taking those moments, learning different things to support my nervous system, which we could spend a whole other topic on, because, you know, if your nervous system is in fight or flight, then that has a lot to do with your stress, your ability to manage stress and all of that. So I learned a lot about my nervous system, and supporting that there, which can be done in the middle of chaos. Like, you don't, yes, having like serene rooms with, you know, essential oils going and all of that stuff is great, but there's ways to do it in the middle of what you're actively going through at the same time. So I feel like that, I hope that helps, but because I feel like it's literally just scratching the surface, but it's so good. And I talk about it a lot on my channels. So good.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I think you're right. We so often confuse self-care with like, we're going to go get a massage, or we're going to make a whole day of it. I'm going to take myself out to lunch, whatever. That's lovely. And it is self-care, but it's not like the foundations of self-care. We talked to Nikki Nurse, who's also a former caregiver recently, and she talks a lot about self-care moments, which is also like what you've just talked about, where it's like, do you have 10 seconds to like, just breathe in deep and like reset? It doesn't have to be a whole thing, you know, a whole day. It can just, how can you bake in self-care moments to your day so that you're maintaining the foundations?
Yeah. Can I add one more thing, Katie?
Yeah, please.
So I remember thinking, like, whenever, especially moments that were like really hard, like I would almost like stop myself, and I would be spinning thoughts, all of this. And I would say to myself, a friend actually asked me this one time, because he had a baby, and he was like, okay, he was like, how do you stay up all night with your mom? Like, I have a child and I can like put her in the crib and she can't get out. Like, your mom is a grown adult. Like, how are you staying up all night? And I said, honestly, like, whenever I'm feeling on the verge of burnout or feeling like really tired, I find myself looking at her, and I like get really present. Like, we're so busy being busy, right? And so like, I take a couple deep breaths, and I would say, one day I'm going to miss even this, you know? And I say that to myself over and over. And like, I would give anything to go back to chasing her around, you know, and making sure that she's safe. Like, even though it was so hard, like, it literally was like, I'm so glad that I paused my life to be able to take the time to do that. And like, I just would find gratitude. I know people talk about gratitude, and I even still sometimes today, I'm like, gratitude, yeah, woo woo, okay, fine. Like, but it's like, do you take time to like really feel it, and like really like, and let it resonate in your body, and let it land, and just be really grateful, and even in those hard moments. So yeah, I just didn't want to pass that moment without being able to share that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's so beautiful and such a good reminder. I was talking to another caregiver who, you know, their mom would repeat the same story over and over again. I'm sure you know, experienced something similar, and this caregiver was sharing, like, it was so frustrating. Like, I've heard the story a million times. I know how it ends. And then one day her mom stopped telling it. And I think that speaks to what you've just said. Like, one day your mom won't be here, and one day your mom won't tell this story again. And even though it's so hard in the moment, it's like, yeah, how can we get really present with this? Because you will miss it, you know? You've talked a little bit now. Thank you for sharing that story. I really appreciate it. You've talked a little bit about, you know, what was lacking when you were caregiving, and a little bit about the work that you're doing now through your channels and business. Can you talk a little bit about what support and resources you found lacking, and the work you're doing now to sort of fill that gap for caregivers that are, you know, currently caregiving?
Yeah. So one, I just started finding the communities and stuff online probably towards the end of my mom's journey. And so I found a lot of resources like how to handle dementia, how to take care of dementia, how to do this, but like not really a whole like there's very surface level information on how to take care of yourself as a caregiver. Like they throw around the term self-care, they throw around the term like not losing yourself, like just, you know, all of that, so like stress support and all of that stuff. I think that I'm just really passionate about helping people to understand their nervous system, how to understand finding joy in the middle of grief. Like, I think just the age of the internet and where we are now, like, there's this beautiful era of transparency, you know, where people are keeping it real and they're not trying to hide. You know, I think that there is like the generation of caregivers before us, there was just this well, I just do it because I have to do it. And it's just, you know, like it's just like another day in the park, and they're not sharing their story or they're not talking about their emotions because it's just like another day. But like, you know, just because our loved one have gotten some sort of diagnosis doesn't mean that we also have to take on that diagnosis and like lose our lives in the process. And I've watched that happen to so many people in the generation above us, is that they've taken care of their parents or whoever it is that has an illness. And all of a sudden, after they're done, then they're coming down with, they're getting cancer, they're getting sick, they're getting all these things. And I believe personally, it's largely in part of not taking care of themselves while they're going through the most traumatic season of their life. And so I'm just super passionate about teaching caregivers like how to navigate the system well, and don't miss the gold in the middle of it. Like there's so much here to learn, to value, to like on this side of heaven. Like this is, you know, no matter what your beliefs are, right? Like this is, you're going to be like, this is your time with them. And so it's like, and it's really those like being able to really take advantage of that time with them and do it in a way that honors them, honors you, and just something that you'll be able to look back and be so glad that you did, you know, rather it being like, oh, there's this whole of 5 years that I gave up my life for, and then you just spend the rest of your life resenting it. Like you can then move on and be like, man, like I'm so glad that I did that. And you have all these beautiful memories to be able to move forward and to live the rest of your life with. So.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. I have a final question for you, but just piggybacking off what you've just said, you know, if someone comes to your channel with this mission and everything you've just said, what can people expect to find and hear from you, and you know, what kind of support can they get from you on your channels?
Yeah. So, honestly, heart, laughter, fun, and just raw transparency. So I'm going to keep it real. I share very, vulnerably and very truthfully, as well as, just really wanting to help you to become the best version of yourself. Like you don't have to wait for this piece of your journey to end before, like you can do work on yourself in the middle of what you're going through. So, and just being so supportive to the caregiver as you're navigating this season. So I'm in the process of like putting together some of the things that like resources, some of the resources that I talked about, putting together a course, just different things to give support. Because like right now with where I'm at, my mom just passed in March, and like I feel very strongly that like I need to continue doing this work, especially in the middle of me grieving. So I'm just trying to navigate and find the best ways to get those resources to people, because it's just I don't know, I just haven't found a whole lot of people doing this work for caregivers online, and I feel really passionate about it. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah, keep us posted, you know, as you put out resources or a course or whatever. Please keep us posted. We'd love to be able to share that with, you know, this community.
Yeah.
We like to ask everyone at the end of the podcast, and you've shared a little bit, but looking back now, what do you know now that you wish you knew at the beginning of caregiving that would have been helpful?
That I'm not in control. There was a time that I thought that I was in control of if my mom lived or died. That was an interesting place to be. And that really, it's all going to be okay. Like, no matter, like, it really is all going to be okay. And one of the biggest things that I always found myself worrying about, like, is this when she's going to die? Is this the time? Like, it was this, like, is this, like, I was so looking to, like, what's coming and, like, what's next, that sometimes I would miss the moment, and I would have to bring myself back and to get out of worry and fear and to just be present in that moment and just know that it's all going to be okay.
Yeah, I love that. Your message of staying present is so clear through everything you've said. So thank you for sharing that. If people want to find you online, hear more from you, where can they go?
Yeah. So millennial caregiver on Instagram. So on Instagram, it's like an _ millennial _ caregiver. I have a personal TikTok, but I'm actually getting ready to build the brand of millennial caregiver. So you can find me millennial caregiver on TikTok too, and on YouTube. So literally anywhere millennial caregiver. I should just say that.
Awesome. We'll be sure to tag you so people can find you.
Okay. Awesome.
And thank you so much for sharing so much about, the financial aspect of caregiving and the systems you built and just your experience. I think it's really valuable for people to hear. I appreciate you sharing so transparently.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie. This has been awesome.